Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, everybody. Today we have a wonderful guest, Courtney Carver. She is an author. She also has a podcast with her daughter, and she has written a book that is coming out in February. It is Gentle, Rest More, Stress Less, and Live the Life You Actually Want. So, welcome to the show, Courtney.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we had a little technical glitches before we got started today, and I need to take Courtney's advice about just kind of stressing less. And it was a wonderful book to read because I really need to put some of the practices that she includes in the book to to heart with both my hands over my heart. But we're going to talk about just a lot of different things in the book. But there are three parts to this book. There's rest, less, and rise. So I'd like to get started just kind of in that order about the importance of rest. And can you talk about why that is so important and the challenges that come with really trying to rest?
Sure. Well, the three sections that you mentioned are actually seasons that we can put ourselves in and go through to become more gentle and to connect with the gentlest sides of ourselves. And I think the reason rest is so important to start with is it's because it's the thing we resist the most. And to illustrate that, I will just say that I had planned on putting the rest section last until I realized I was doing it right there, like trying to save it for later. And we put off rest until our bodies demand it, until we can find a little like window in our schedule, until we go on vacation. And it's not enough, clearly. I mean, the reason that I think a lot of us get into that really exhausted state is because we don't prioritize rest. We don't think we have the time. There's always something ahead of it on the to-do list. And so until we just say enough is enough and make it first, we'll forever be lacking that opportunity to reset and renew and really feel so much better.
Right. I know that you mentioned in your book, and so many of us, most of our audience are midlife women. And in our younger years, we always heard, oh, you can do it all, you can have it all, go, go, go. And then, we're always serving other people. Can you talk a little bit about how that was part of your personal life and how that changed for you?
Yeah, they definitely told us we could have it all, but they forgot to tell us we might not want it.
Yeah.
And we were so busy, we didn't even take time to question ourselves or what we wanted or needed. I feel like most of us were on this autopilot um, life, and we were just doing everything we had to do to make sure that we kept the ends meeting and all the people where they needed to go and getting our stuff done and proving ourselves both to the world around us and to ourselves about how wonderful we were. We needed that validation. And I'm sure that a lot of us still look for that in different places. But once you see that when you start measuring who you are by what you accomplish, there's no end in sight. It's never enough because you have to keep doing more and more and more. And there's this like message, I think, that we were all maybe born with or was somehow implanted that the more things we did, the better people we would be. But as it turns out, doing more things doesn't make you a better person. It just makes you a tired person. And for me, that real wake up call to slow down came in 2006 after I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It was this giant permission slip to step back, reassess, figure out not only how to live well with MS, but how to take better care of myself, how to listen to what I really wanted in life. And I never thought I'd be thankful for a condition like that, but wow, I really am.
Right. That's amazing because a lot of people that's not going to happen to. But that was, you say, permission slip to slow down. And in your book, you have like steps in each chapter. Do you mind going along how you designed your different sections or seasons in your book? And you do include at the end of each little part a permission slip, which it is so difficult to do that, to allow yourself permission. You don't even know that you don't give yourself permission. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, when it comes to the permission slips, I think, again, just like with rest, we feel like we have to earn and deserve everything. And we forget that we're grown. We can just take it. We're adults. Like we can do what we want. So if you want to take a nap in the middle of the day, you can cancel an appointment and take a nap. If you need to take some time off from social media, you can do that. Like these things are available to us, and maybe not all the time in every stage of our lives, but for the most part, I think there are a lot of real tiny steps we can take that will make a difference. In each season of the book, the chapters are practices for that season. So in the rest section, I think there's about 10 different practices that you can put into place to rest more in your life. And then in each chapter at the end, I give you some tiny steps and also a gentle step. Because if this isn't something that you're used to and you don't start small, tiny, gentle, oh, it's just like all of the other habits you've probably tried in the past where you go big and then you exhaust yourself. You burn out from trying to make too much change at once. At least that's what used to happen to me all the time. And then, same in the less section and the rise section. Again, practices, tiny steps, and a gentle step. I really wanted to share my experience, but also create a really clear roadmap on how you can get to know the gentle you and start to rise from that place instead of trying to always rise from the exhausted, overextended you.
Right. You know, I love the tiny steps because I'm one of those people that I like to get things out of the way. I'm like, and you mentioned in your book your checklist, your check marks and things like that, and the tiny steps. Can you talk about why the tiny and the gentle steps? You kind of did address it a little bit, but why the tiny and the gentle steps make progress? Like you may not feel like it, but you are making progress.
Sure. Well, I put them in place because that is what really impacted my own journey. I had to change the way I change because prior to getting sick and really having to figure things out, I would get really excited about a habit change. I would read a new self help book in the 80s or the 90s, and they were all like, buckle down, go big or go home, push through. And I thought, yeah, I need to do that. I have to be more disciplined, tougher, harder. And I would go for it. And within the promised 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever they said, I wouldn't have accomplished much of anything. It felt like I was making progress. And then I just gave up because it was too hard to stay with it. And so when I started making habit changes in the name of changing the way I change, I was looking at one thing at a time, really tiny steps, mostly because I was too tired to take bigger steps. And also, I realized that I never really knew where I was going to end up or what these tiny steps would lead to. But I gave myself so much of a runway to take it slowly that I had time to really incorporate the lessons I was learning. And probably more importantly, I could finally, for the first time in my life, really hear myself, really hear what I wanted, what I needed, what my body was telling me. And that only came from taking the pressure off and realizing that I didn't have to be so disciplined or so perfect or so good or any of that nonsense. I could just take a tiny step and see what happened.
And I love the tiny step things too. Like if you want to read more, okay, so you read a paragraph, you read a page, tiny, tiny that you are making the progress, because I think you bring up in the book as well about we're trying to get validation, like you said earlier, we're trying to get this external validation from the outside world to make us feel like we're doing the right thing or we're doing great, like you said. And it really spoke to me that it is okay. It is okay to do this little bit. Another part that you talk about, and you've written previous books on this, is the less part. And just the part about not really having so much stuff and the advice with that. Can you touch on the less? I mean, you talked about in the book how you moved from this huge home to a smaller place and how you just feel so much stress free. That is a big thing, just the stress free. Can you talk
Yeah, what's
about that?
interesting is becoming stress-free or lower stress was my main purpose after my diagnosis. I'd done a lot of research. It seemed like people who were living with less stress were having better outcomes, fewer relapses. And this doesn't just apply to MS. I mean, I think it applies to most conditions and even just our regular day to day. You don't have a diagnosis, but you find you get worn out or you get colds easily or whatever it is. Stress has to be a contributing factor to all of that. And while I know it sounds silly to say that you could remove all stress, certainly we can remove some stress. And for me, the answer to reducing stress was simplifying my life. And so getting rid of my clutter, getting rid of my debt, getting rid of a job that didn't serve me anymore. All of this took years. It wasn't an overnight thing. And um, the less that I had, or the more that I released, the better I felt. The less there was to take care of, the less there was to clean, the less there was to manage. Um, and not having so much to think about. I mean, about how our brains are just like all day long trying to keep track of everything. And I started this in, like I said, 2006. It was kind of just as it was for me pre social media, pre blogging, pre all of that stuff. And I think today, for someone just getting started, not only are you looking for that validation in your own life, but now we have this whole other layer of online noise, and that needs its own simplicity filter for sure, because otherwise we won't have time to do anything except respond to everyone else's thoughts and opinions. It's too
Uh,
much.
it is amazing when you talk about that. I know one time I went somewhere. I was in Italy with my siblings, and we were staying at this villa this woman owned, and she came by, and we're like, "Oh, it's so beautiful," and she said, "But it's so heavy." She just said it is so heavy, and it made me think about different things in my life. What do I want more of? And something similar situation to this woman came up where our the home we grew up in was selling and it was going to be torn down, and should I buy this home, should I try to buy this home? And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't live there anymore. I'd have to travel, I'd have to maintain. Yes, I'm sad, I lived there for 18 years. But I'm like, it would be so heavy. And that is, it just reminded me when you said the stress, the more things you have, the harder it is to just manage and take care of it all. And then you touch on social media, which, oh my goodness, like you just said, it can add so much stress. You're so worried, you're reading what people are thinking about you. Can you talk about just little tiny steps about what people can do to try to stay away from, not even stay away, but just manage the stress that social media comes into play with?
I mean, honestly, I think the only way to manage the stress is to have of less screen time, less time on the social platforms. And I'm not saying it's easy by any means. I go in and out with, how much time I want to spend here. What is the purpose? What am I doing? What am I offering? What am I getting back? And I've made some amazing, wonderful connections and friendships on social media. So I have to give it that. But it seems like it's just growing into this very compelling place to be, but compelling for no reason that I can see. Like I never spend time scrolling and then finish and think, oh my gosh, that was time well spent. Nor do I remember anything I saw, except I just feel a little depressed. Eh, It's just kind of the way it goes. And so I just try to be mindful of that and spend my time, you know, doing the connecting that I can do within a short amount of time and then leaving. I think extended breaks are so helpful. If you can take 24 hours off the internet and digital devices a week, wow. I don't do it every week, but on the weeks that I do, it makes such a tremendous difference. I mean, the day just seems to go on longer than a normal day. There's more like lingering and noticing, and it happens very fast. Like the first couple of hours, you think, oh my gosh, what is happening out there? You know, what am I missing? Who's missing me? And then by the next day, you don't really want to go back. And when you do, you find out that no one even notices that you weren't there.
I mean, yeah, I was amazed. Was it your husband that did like a, did he do a month off,
He's
or he's done, or
he's done.
he's
He was
done?
planning on taking about a month off. And then he just never went back. And now it's been, I mean, that was when I started writing the book. So it's been more than a year now. And he just never went back and does not miss it.
Wow. I mean, that is my husband is rarely on it as well, like very rarely. And it is amazing. He seems very happy. He actually seems very positive. Another thing that really struck with me is the news breaks that you don't. Oh, can you talk about that? Because that
Sure.
stresses me out.
Yes, the news is stressful. It's very stressful now, but if I'm looking back, it's always stressful. And n- I think the way that it's delivered now is hard because it's not like you watch or see or read an article. It's just this little drip of horror all day long, and it's coming from all directions. And so you really have to put some boundaries around how you take the news in because breaking news is broken. There's no doubt about it. It's all breaking news, which is traumatic to our nervous systems. And I'm not saying be uninformed. I'm not saying never watch the news again. I would challenge you to do that. I mean, it's so hard to get away from it. If you're not watching it, someone's talking to you about it. But things that I've put into place that have been really helpful is that I don't watch any news videos. So anything I take in around news is either in the form of an article or sometimes a podcast. Uh, I don't want the visuals. I really don't. It's not helping me to take action in any direction. It's just making me sleep poorly.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was saying, you had the point in there about PTSD from someone who was actually at an event to someone who watched it all day. Can you talk about that?
there was a study done about the um, Boston Marathon bombing. And I remember watching that unfold on the news and watching it on TV. And then when I left and got in my car, listening to it on the radio and just like following it from the minute it started until the minute it ended. I was terrified. And when I reflect on that now, of course, I know that if I had been away from that, I could have heard about it 2 days later, made a donation to the victims, been helpful in some way without going through that myself. And this study showed that people who watched that unfold as they did had more PTSD than people who were actually at the event. Because, and actually, the rest, I'm just thinking about why that might be. But my thoughts are if you were at the event, that had to have been horrible, horrible, but you didn't see it from every single angle and you didn't hear people repeating it over and over and over again all day long. I have to think that contributed to that because it doesn't make any sense to me. When I heard that, I
Right.
was like, this can't be real.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
yeah, I agree with that.
and
Yeah.
so what are we doing to ourselves as we're watching news all the time now? And I would say, like, if you're watching the news and it is helping you contribute to solutions and take action and better your life or someone else's life in some way, keep watching. Go. And that's not how I operate at all. I'd rather have a like high level understanding of what's going on, kind of bird's eye view. And then I can decide on a case by case basis where I'm going to dive in and when I'm going to dive in. It's not going to be right before I go to bed, and it's not going to be right when I wake up in the morning.
Right.
I want a chance to have a thought for myself.
That is another thing because you can rest better, probably not having that thought before you go to bed. And then when you wake up, what is the reasoning when you wake up not to have that be the first thing that you think
Well,
of?
if the first thing is the news or somebody's Facebook post or what's going on Instagram, then I don't have my own thoughts first.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
my day is guided by what everyone else thinks or what's going on around me. And I mean, I can take those first 10
Mm-hmm.
minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, and just be in my own glory with my coffee. I don't need all the extra. It's going to come for me, I know,
Mm-hmm.
but I can decide when and where, which I feel really grateful to have noticed that and been able to implement that.
Right. And you're talking about noticing like just you're having your coffee in the morning, having your tea. Could you talk about is that part of I'm getting confused. Is that part of the rise or was that part of uh
Yes.
yes, yeah.
So in the less section, we talk about everything from clutter to the news to alcohol even. And in the rise section, this is you've rested, you've cleared out, made some space for yourself in different areas of your life. And now in the rise section, you are enjoying your life, thriving in your life, meeting your goals, reaching for the stars, whatever you want to do. Being gentle doesn't mean you don't care about things at all anymore. It doesn't mean you don't want things for yourself. It's exactly the opposite. But now you can do it with some resilience and stillness and purpose. And in that section, I have a chapter called Simple Pleasures, enjoying simple pleasures. And this is something I think as adults, we all need to do for ourselves on a daily basis. And usually it's just enjoying something that you already have going on in your life, but giving it a little more attention, a little more celebration. So for me, that's having a coffee and chatting with my sister or chatting with my daughter and having a fun little phone conversation in the morning or going for a walk. Things that aren't expensive, but that really make a big difference in my day. But it's not like I'm just grabbing the coffee and then drinking it while I'm doing 10 other things. I'm trying to enjoy my life. And the only way I can do that is by being here and noticing it.
Right. I really love too your section where you talk about unsolicited advice. I love that. How to deal with it and how to monitor yourself if you're giving it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this actually came from a survey that I did with my blog readers on bemorewithless.com. And the survey was about boundaries. And one of the questions I asked is, what is something that you tolerate in your life that you wish you didn't have to tolerate? And the answers were all about this, like advice about how I parent, advice about what I eat, advice about just on and on and on about unsolicited advice. And I had to really check myself because wow, do I love to give my daughter advice or a friend advice? And I think we want to do that to help. But as author Anne Lamott says, help is the sunny side of control.
I love that. I love it.
And that I was like, oh my gosh, am I helping? Am I controlling? Maybe a little bit of each. Either way, this doesn't sound great. And so I think we, again, all like to offer our opinion, but what would be so much more helpful and genuine and connecting for our relationships is if we asked first, do you want some advice? Do you just want to vent? Do you just want me to listen? Would it be okay if I told you this thing about this thing? And when they say no, believe them.
Right.
No. And then I'll say, okay, maybe another time.
Yeah. I mean, I really, that was so good because I feel like that I'm guilty of giving unsolicited advice, especially to my children, like you said, your children. And then when you hear someone that constantly wants to give you unsolicited advice, you've already put up this, you're trying to establish a boundary. You've put up this wall with that person, like, I know what's going to happen. Then you're tense around that person when they're in your space. So I thought that that was really wonderful. And another thing you bring up, being gentle doesn't mean that you're a pushover or that you could be walked on. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's for sure. I think there might be some confusion sometimes about being kind, soft, gentle, that we're just going to put up with a lot of, can I
Yeah.
say,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we're just going to put up with a lot of that. And that isn't what it is at all. It's actually the way that we start to take some of those layers down to be more open to our own thoughts, our own feelings, who we are, who we want to be in this world, how we want to experience life. And with that, it helps us create good boundaries. Um, it helps us not tolerate abusive behavior. It helps us to get what we want,
Right.
actually.
And you also mentioned Elise Myers and a situation that happened to her. And I'm going to use that from now on. Can you talk a little bit about that situation? Do you remember that as well? Like the hotel
I
clerk?
remember it. I know I'm not going to tell the story as well as she will because she is a brilliant
Yes.
storyteller. Um, Elise Myers, oh my gosh, if you don't follow her on YouTube or Instagram after I just told you to stay off social media, she's fantastic. Oh, I'm not going to be able to remember it word for
Oh,
word, but
yeah.
essentially she was working in a hotel and a gentleman came in and basically demanded a an upgrade or wanted to check in early. Forgive me if I'm not getting this quite right, but wanted to check in early and she was working there and she said, "I'm sorry, we don't have any rooms available." And he essentially uh, slapped his credit card down on the counter and said, "Make it happen." And she very calmly, I would even say gently, slid the card back to him and said, "I do not receive that," and walked away. And those words, "I do not receive that," I thought were just so powerful. She didn't lose her cool. She didn't tell him off. She didn't jump over the counter and grab him. She turned around, walked away after she said, I'm not accepting anything that just came out of your mouth. And I think we all get to do that. So we can hear something that we know is untrue about us, especially generally, it's something that is hurtful. It's not critical in a helpful sense. It's just mean, as this gentleman was. And we can decide, I am not going to take that on or in. I do
Oh,
not receive that.
I love that. There were just so many things from your book that just things that I could easily put to use, very simply put to use, and just to make my life calmer and less stressful. It was really wonderful. So could you share your website and the name of your podcast and how people could reach you?
Sure. So the website is bemorewithless.com. I am on Instagram at Be More With Less. And the podcast that we record occasionally now is called the Soul and Wit Podcast, which I record with my daughter Bailey. And people can get in touch with me almost any of those places. You can email me. Pretty easy to find out there.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Courtney Carver. Gentle, rest more, stress less, and live the life you actually want. It will be available in February. And thank you so much for being on our show today.
My pleasure. Thank you.